All right, I want to thank you for joining me for episode 2 of my series, The Strange and Unexplained Phenomena of South Mountains of North Carolina. I am your host, researcher, investigator, lifelong outdoorsman, and content creator, Kaiser Rebel. This is episode 2, and it is titled, It's Watching Us. On October the 28th in 2023, a group descended into a creek bottom about 5 miles south of the middle of the southern boundary of the South Mountain State Park. This group had camped previous times in 2020, 2021, 2022, and now again in 2023, and their express purpose was to see if they could experience the things that are known to happen in the area of the South Mountains, the things that fall within the confines of the reputation that we have here. And they had other excursions where they also experienced things, and we'll cover them in later episodes. But the group got in place, set up camp, and nothing of noteworthiness happened except to say that at some point in broad daylight, that something was thrown and disturbed the tops of the trees. They weren't sure if it's a stick or rock, but something heavy with some mass to it. And they elected not to start a fire that night. They wanted to maintain light and noise discipline. And they soon began talking with hushed voices as night fell. And they had a prearranged start time for a 9:30 night hike. But about 9 o'clock, very close but in the distance, they heard whooping. And you can Google that and become more familiar with this noise that is associated with cryptids. But they heard the whooping. And it stopped, and at 9:30 they set out on foot to do their night hike, and they traveled south from their camp in the creek bottom, and they got about 100 yards or so from camp, and they heard back in the direction of their camp some type of growling noise. All the members of the group stayed in place except for two, Sean and Ray. These are not their real names. We're protecting the witness's identity. They got back to camp and they didn't see anything, didn't observe anything, but all members of the group agreed that they did hear the same noise. So they continued uphill, their destination being a long ridge that runs east-west, west-east. And as they reached high ground, then they heard the very distinct sound of wood knocks, and it was coming from back in the direction of their camp. So if it wasn't in their camp, it was very close. They stopped and listened. Nothing else happened. Then they continued on their journey, traveling eastward on that ridge. They got to the east end of the ridge, and they turned south to start descending back toward another creek bottom. And they were overcome by a smell. Now, it's a putrid smell. I've experienced it many times. It's not a skunk. It's not the musk of a bear. And you can do your own research and become familiar with that. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to tell you it's a very putrid, stout smell. And they stopped. And Ray said, let's stay in place. Let's watch and listen and observe. That very morning, Mike, which was Ray's cousin, had received in the mail a thermal rifle scope. He didn't have it mounted on a rifle. He familiarized himself with it to the extent that he could operate it. But everyone else watched and listened, and he scanned the area with the thermal scope, and suddenly Ray heard him say, Ray, I need you to come here. And Ray walked to his position, and he said, don't move the scope, look in the scope. I want you to see what I'm seeing. And Ray saw something standing behind a tree. He saw two shoulders sticking out of what appeared to be a very large tree. And as he was trying to make sense of it, a face in this manner peeped out several times looking at him. And he described the thermal signature as having the hot spots around the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, but not in the periphery of the face, indicating that it would have been covered by something, presumably hair. And he said to Mike, Mike, it's watching us. Each member of the group had their turn looking through the scope, and soon, as Mike continued to watch, he reported to the group, he said, it's moving away from us, it's walking backwards. And it soon disappeared and went out of view, and as it did, the smell dissipated and went away completely. So after observing and listening a few more minutes, they backtracked, and they doubled back and took the same route that they had took to get there. They picked up the smell again, and there was distinct footprints to the northeast of them. Close, distinct footsteps I should say. And that stopped. The smell went away. And they continued to move westward, retracing their steps. And then from the south of them, they heard footsteps, distinct footsteps of something walking on 2 feet. And when they would stop to listen, it would stop. As they started walking again, it would continue walking again. And that went on for 5 or 10 minutes. And then it stopped. But then in the distance, not in the sky, but below the treetops, they saw lights. Not sure what to make of them. I'm not sure what to make of them now, but these lights blinked on and off. They moved. And then they stopped. And the group decided to go ahead and head back to camp. They got back down into the creek bottom. They, of course, were excited. They discussed the events. They had some snacks. And then they, one by one, they fell asleep. But at 3:30 in the morning, Mike's wife, Jenny, woke the group up and said, "We're surrounded." And in multiple directions all around them, they were hearing the sound of something or someone walking on 2 feet. And their testimony is they were completely surrounded. That went on for about an hour and stopped, and finally all the members of the group except 2 fell asleep and slept till morning. And the 2 that stayed awake reported once again seeing the lights, but not hearing any other sounds of wood knocks or whoops or footsteps. So the next morning they packed up camp, and to this day when the group gets together, that is the subject of what they talk about. I appreciate y'all taking your time to watch my series, and I appreciate all of your support. And please keep sending me your accounts. The folks that live in the South Mountains area and Western North Carolina in general, please continue to send me your accounts, and I will speak with you, and perhaps we can tell your story on some of the future episodes. Thank you all so much, and until next time, I'm Kaiser Rebel.